Everyone needs a hero, and Howie Dog's it for me. He lived in a cage in a shelter for 5 long years, you see. But Howie was brave, he never gave up, even though he got no love. Instead, he worked on his acrobat tricks. He did clever high jumps and all sorts of flips. He made all the other dogs laugh and see what a truly great hero should be. What a truly great hero should be. Howie, written by Aaron O'Connor, illustrated by Mike Goldstein, based on a true story. One beautiful spring day in the city of Santa Monica, California, a male beagle and a female border collie fell in love. Weeks later, 9 beagle border collie puppies were born. As it happens with dogs, the mommy loved all her babies. She cared for them and prepared them for the challenges that lay ahead. She knew her little ones would be leaving soon for lives of their own. And so it was, when the puppies reached 8 weeks of age, many different people came to pick and choose a sweet furry baby to take home and love. It is Howie, however, whose life story I am passing on to you. Why is this, you may ask? Because everyone needs a hero, and Howie is just that, a hero for us all. Howie was scared the day he had to leave the only home he had ever known. It was a real tearjerker. Everyone cried, even Howie, who had never ever cried until that day. Jerry and Debbie Cooper seemed like a nice young couple, but they never realized what a huge responsibility it would be to raise a puppy. They lived in a small apartment with no yard for Howie. He depended on them for walks so he could relieve himself. Sometimes Jerry and Debbie forgot this, and Howie would have accidents, which were never his fault. This made Jerry and Debbie very angry. Added to this housebreaking problem, Howie had way too much energy for apartment living. He needed to run and play, to chase, tumble, and roughhouse, like he had with his family at his birth home. His needs were seldom met. Jerry and Debbie always seemed to have better things to do than walk Howie or play with him. Soon they began to call him names like Crazy Dog or Bad Dog. Finally, to Howie's sorrow, they called him a big mistake. One rainy day, Jerry and Debbie left Howie alone all day. He had an accident and became so anxious that he chewed one of Debbie's favorite pair of shoes. When Jerry and Debbie returned home, they were furious. They were so upset, in fact, they threw Howie into the car and drove him to the nearest animal shelter. It was called Mildred's Animal Shelter. It was a dirty, smelly, and disgusting place. Jerry and Debbie wrote a big check for Mildred, which she demanded, and left Howie without even saying goodbye. For the next 5 years, Howie suffered a life no dog deserves. Old Lady Mildred had owned the shelter for many years. People in her community thought she was kind and loving, but to all the dogs that lived there, she was mean and horrible and the cause of all their misery. Many people gave Mildred generous donations because they thought she was helping the poor dogs, and soon her bank account grew quite large. Kind strangers were fooled into believing that Mildred was a great humanitarian. Ha! In reality, Mildred spent as little money as possible on the poor dogs. Instead of hiring dog walkers and trainers or making a nice yard for the dogs to play in and enjoy, she left them all in cement cages, separated from the world and each other. For 2 years, Howie was never walked, played with, hugged, or loved. No dog was ever bathed unless it was adopted, and adoptions were quite rare. You see, Mildred's only concern was keeping the shelter full. That way, people mistakenly believed she was an angel for caring for so many unwanted dogs. Howie and the other dogs waited day after day for someone to adopt them. Unfortunately for Howie, the days became months, and the months became years. During those first few years at the shelter, the only humans Howie and the other rescued dogs ever saw were Jose and Jaime. These two men worked every day, for very little money, I might add. You know Mildred. They worked hard, hosing down the cement cages, filling water bowls with fresh water, and feeding the animals donated food with the word expired written on the bag. Fortunately, Howie was a clever dog. You could actually see him thinking. In order not to go crazy, Howie learned 2 skills that helped him get through each day, through the loneliness, fear, and sorrow. First, Howie discovered his acrobatic talents. He practiced tricks for hours and hours all day long. If Howie were a human being, he would be called a great athlete, a gymnast even. Jose and Jaime watched in awe as Howie performed his many tricks and flips. They laughed so much that they started looking forward to coming to work just to enjoy Howie. When Howie became exhausted from his daily workout, he would stretch out in his cement cage and observe the other dogs. He watched everyone and everything and became very, very smart. One of Howie's favorite dogs to watch was Big Red, a 3-year-old shepherd mix. He had a shiny red coat and bright golden eyes. Big Red would rise up on his hind legs like a stallion, showing all the other dogs his splendor. Rocky was another shelter brother of Howie's. He came from the streets. He was a Beagle Pit Bull mix. He had many scars all over his body and face. No one dared to imagine what little Rocky had suffered. But, in spite of it all, Rocky was always happy, outgoing, and friendly. Howie learned from him that life is better faced each day with a smile. Oz was another of Howie's favorites. He was a Weimaraner Labrador mix. He was sleek, gray in color, with amazing green eyes. Every day, Oz watched Howie exercise in the cold cement cage across from his. He would look at Howie with his piercing eyes as if to say, "Howie, you are brilliant." Coming from a dog like Oz, Howie felt proud about this. In fact, it gave him strength to live on. There were so many dogs, 60 in all, who lived with Howie in the shelter. There were many different breeds, different sizes, and different personalities. To Howie, it was fascinating to realize that no 2 dogs were the same. During Howie's 4th year at the shelter, a wonderful thing happened. A group of volunteers came to help. Mildred did not like this, but one of her most generous donors insisted that it was a good thing. Mildred couldn't stand the thought of losing this person's big donations, and so she agreed. One day, a man named Sal took Howie hiking in the mountains. Another day, a man named Michael took Howie for a day at the beach. However, since Howie was always in a panic to escape, he was a handful to walk. He dragged both these men by his leash. They had to be in the right mood to deal with Howie. For this reason, Howie was not often chosen for walks or outings. That is, until Shara came to the shelter. She was amazing. Howie had never met anyone like Shara. She was beautiful, fun, exciting, and caring. Jose and Jaime loved Shara too. They even let her go back to the big dog cement cages where no one was ever allowed. She made friends with all the dogs and got to know each one by name. She brought fresh chicken to feed all her shelter friends, and she would say, "I'm going to find homes for each and every one of you." Jose, Jaime, and the dogs believed her. You see, Shara was the kind of person who was true to her word. Somehow, a miracle perhaps, she began to have power over Mildred. She took many sick dogs to the veterinarian. One day she brought the vet to the shelter, when Mildred wasn't there, and he gave all the dogs vaccinations to protect them. Shara came every other day to the shelter. She brought fresh, healthy food and treats and chewies to calm the nerves of all the dogs. Also, although some of the dogs were too afraid or difficult to walk, Shara managed to walk many others. Rocky, Big Red, and Howie were 3 of the lucky ones to be walked each time Shara came. No easy task. One day, Shara brought a dog trainer named Leonard to the shelter. She had hired him to work with the most nervous and energetic dogs. She told Mildred, "These dogs can be healed, and they deserve a chance." Mildred, of course, did not want this. She ended up in a screaming match with Leonard. She told him to get out and not to come back after he told her she was a disgrace to the human race. Shara would not give up. She was a problem solver. She knew the dogs needed exercise, discipline, and most importantly, love from human companions. This is when and how the team was born. It was made up of 4 of Shara's good friends who also loved dogs and wanted to help. They came ready to work. Shara and the team could not fix all 60 dogs at once, so they came up with a plan. They decided to concentrate on 5 or 6 dogs at a time. This was the best strategy. Calling them their focus dogs, the team worked hard to heal them. Slowly, but surely, the focus dogs became calmer, happier, and adoptable. Howie was thrilled that morning in November when Shara declared him the newest focus dog. He was so excited that Jose and Shara had to hold him tight as his choke collar and leash were secured. For several weeks, different members of the team came to give Howie his daily walk. As he began to trust his volunteers, he started to enjoy these walks, smelling bushes, saying hi to the many passers-by, and obeying commands like stay, no, relax. All the volunteers thought Howie was fun and funny. They laughed at the clever things he did. Best of all, they called him good dog, good Howie. They kissed him, hugged him, loved him. While Howie, Oz, and Rocky and a few others were handled by the team, Shara paid Leonard, the trainer, lots of money to work with the dogs who had special needs without Mildred knowing. She would come early in the morning, smuggle high-maintenance dogs into her car, and drive them to her home where Leonard waited. Dogs like Big Red, Rusty, and Rudy improved a lot when this big, strong, strict man worked to train and discipline them. It was remarkable to watch Leonard recreate a wild dog into a peaceful dog. In addition to all this training, Shara and her team got the word out to the community. They put posters up all over town with pictures of the shelter dogs ready to be adopted. They advertised in many different newspapers and on the internet as well. It was from an ad on the internet that Howie's chance finally came. Their names were Tom and Micah. They had seen Howie's picture and had fallen in love with his face. Although they lived in Santa Barbara, a city 90 miles away, they wanted to come and meet this adorable Howie. When Shara told Mildred this great news, she was not happy. "Santa Barbara? Are you crazy? It's too far away," she said in her usual grouchy voice. Shara would not give in. This was a chance of a lifetime for Howie. She knew this when she told Mildred, "You must not say no, Mildred. Howie has been living in a cage for so long now. He deserves this. Besides, I am sure they will give you a generous donation." Mildred loved this idea, and finally she reluctantly agreed. It was final. Micah and Tom would come in 1 week to meet little Howie. All the volunteers were thrilled when they heard the good news. They worked extra hard all week long preparing Howie for his big day. Howie loved the special attention everyone showed him. First, Aaron, Howie's most frequent volunteer, took him to the pet store and bought him a special halter. This made Howie easier to walk. The team worked on commands like stay, sit, slow down, relax, constantly. They exercised him until he dropped. Everyone gave him lots of love. That's not all this group of tireless volunteers did that week. They continued to work just as hard with all the other focus dogs as well. They knew it would not be long before these other dogs got their chances too. On a bright and sunny Saturday morning, Shara arrived at Mildred's animal shelter super early. She brought Howie out of his cage and with the help of Jose, lifted him into a big sink. It was Howie's first bath and he really enjoyed it. He felt happy and proud when everyone, including Mildred, told him how great he smelled and how handsome he looked. Micah and Tom arrived at the shelter at 12 noon. Mildred greeted them very kindly, pretending to be the dog lover she wasn't. Then the big moment came. Howie and Shara walked through the door. For Howie, Micah, and Tom, it seemed to be love at first sight. Howie was lovely to Tom and Micah, and they were lovely to him. Then came the words, "We want Howie." Shara cried. Jose and Jaime high-fived, and Mildred scurried around trying to find the necessary papers for Tom and Micah to sign. Howie was going to Santa Barbara, to a wonderful home, to a wonderful life. But Mildred had one final rule. "I need to see where Howie will be living. I want to make sure he'll be safe and happy in his new home." What a joke. And so Tom and Micah said their tearful goodbyes. Shara promised to bring Howie to Santa Barbara, along with creepy Mildred, in a few days. Can you believe it? The news spread fast among the volunteers and all of Howie's shelter pals, and as if on a roll, Aspen, Big Red, and Oz all found homes within a week of Howie's big break. Finally, the day of departure arrived. The team was all there. They gave Howie a big send-off. There were lots of going-away gifts, including a beautiful fleece bed, a new ball, a stuffed toy, and some delicious chewy bones. Shara arrived in her Rolls-Royce luxury car looking like a movie star. Then the volunteers loaded Howie's bed and gifts onto the back seat. Aaron, Howie's most loyal volunteer, climbed into the back of the car with Howie, while Mildred climbed onto the front seat next to Shara. As the car pulled away from the shelter, Howie took one last look and then settled down for the long ride on his new cozy bed. Tom and Micah were so joyous when the Rolls-Royce pulled up in front of their home. They took lots of photographs as Howie and his fellow travelers exited the car. You would swear that Howie had a big smile on his face when Micah ran up to greet him. They all took a tour of Howie's new digs. It was a really pretty house. Howie loved his big backyard. There was a couch on the patio where Tom said Howie could sunbathe. He found his food and water bowls in a special spot in the kitchen. It was obvious Howie was going to be very happy with Tom and Micah, and very much loved. Shara and Aaron shed tears of happiness and sorrow when it was time to say goodbye. Mildred was too busy collecting a big donation from Tom and Micah to become emotional over Howie. She barely patted him on the head, as if she hardly knew him or cared, which, of course, was the truth. Howie stood with Micah and Tom and watched the luxury car as it disappeared from view. Then, with his new red collar and leash secured, Howie and his new family went on their first walk of many they would experience together. As the days became weeks, the weeks became months, and the months became years. The end. P.S. So why is Howie a hero? Well, he never gave in to his sorrow. He never gave in to his fear, and he never turned his anger onto anyone. Howie hung in there, finding the good in every day, even though he existed for so long in a cage. This, to me, is heroic. Don't you agree? What a truly great hero should